The FBI in the Atlanta area making a major drug bust. Federal agents say they stopped millions of dollars of hard drugs from hitting the streets. The feds making that announcement just a few hours ago.
5:06 a.m., Washington, D.C. The city was dark and silent. Embassy Row sat empty under streetlights. Most residents slept. Then black SUVs rolled to a stop. No sirens. No warnings. Just federal agents in tactical gear moving toward the Venezuelan embassy with sealed warrants in hand. What happened next would expose the most dangerous abuse of diplomatic power in American history. Let me show you. Inside Ambassador Rafael Ignacio Salazar's private office, agents found 28.4 kilograms of pure fentanyl, hidden beneath false panels, concealed in diplomatic shipping containers marked as humanitarian aid, $38.7 million in cash, stacked in sealed bags behind a bookshelf, arranged by denomination, bundled with Venezuelan government seals, encrypted phones with military-grade security, financial records showing protected shipments worth $627 million annually, documents proving years of deliberate coordination. This was not one mistake. This was a system, a criminal pipeline operating under the shield of diplomatic immunity, protected by flags, hidden by paperwork, untouchable by law. Until now. If you want the full truth, hit like so this story reaches more people who need to understand how trust was weaponized. The office looked ordinary. Mahogany desk, leather chairs, framed photographs of handshakes and ceremonies. The Venezuelan flag hung beside the American one. But the deeper agents searched, the clearer it became. This wasn't diplomacy. This was betrayal. Salazar had worked from this office for 6 years. He had appeared on television 187 times. He spoke calmly about international cooperation, sanctions relief, humanitarian dialogue. He shook hands with senators. He attended state dinners. He smiled for cameras. Behind that smile was something else entirely. Federal analysts uncovered 94 suspicious financial transfers over 4 years. The money moved through 17 shell companies. Florida, Delaware, Cayman Islands, Cyprus, each labeled as cultural exchange or medical supplies. None of it was real. Shipping logs revealed the scale. Diplomatic cargo traveled without inspection. Trucks crossed state lines with sealed containers protected by international law. Nobody could touch them. Nobody could ask questions. Over 10 years, analysts estimated the network moved more than $1.4 billion in illegal revenue. Protected shipments carried narcotics, weapons, and cash through ports in Baltimore, Miami, Houston, and Los Angeles, all under diplomatic seals. The investigation began 18 months earlier when a routine bank alert flagged unusual patterns. Late-night wire transfers from Venezuelan diplomatic accounts. Repeated payments to companies with no traceable operations. One analyst followed the thread. Then another. Then 12 more. By the time federal prosecutors had enough evidence, the network stretched across 4 continents. Venezuela, Colombia, Mexico, China, Russia. Comment exposed below if you believe the American people deserve to know how deep this goes. At 4:11 a.m., the order went out. Operation Iron Diplomacy. All units move. More than 1,127 federal agents deployed simultaneously across 4 states. FBI, DEA, ICE, ATF, U.S. Marshals. Coordinated task forces in Virginia, Maryland, Florida, and New York. Every target connected to the embassy's supply chain. In Northern Virginia, armored vehicles stopped outside a secured diplomatic storage facility. The building looked clean, industrial, ordinary. When agents breached the steel door, gunfire erupted. Bullets tore through metal shelving. Sparks lit the darkness. Agents took cover behind shipping crates and advanced inch by inch. The firefight lasted 23 minutes. When it ended, suspects were in custody. Inside the warehouse were sealed containers marked with diplomatic stamps. Hundreds of kilograms of fentanyl and cocaine hidden beneath layers of legitimate cargo. At the port of Baltimore, another team intercepted a late-night shipment listed as medical relief equipment. The paperwork was flawless. Bills of lading, customs exemptions, diplomatic authorizations. The contents told a different story. Weapons, cash bundled in plastic, GPS tracking devices used to coordinate distribution across the eastern seaboard. In Miami, federal teams surrounded a high-rise apartment used as a financial command center. When agents entered, suspects attempted to destroy hard drives and phones. One tried to flee down a service stairwell. He didn't make it past the 3rd floor. Back in Virginia, a federal sergeant was hit in the shoulder during the warehouse firefight. He stayed conscious. Medics pulled him back as the team pushed forward. No one broke formation. By sunrise, the numbers were staggering. 3.82 tons of narcotics seized. 417 weapons recovered, 289 suspects in custody. More importantly, the routes were shut down. The protected corridors were gone. For years, this network had hidden behind paperwork and privilege. That morning, it faced something stronger: coordination, discipline, law enforcement acting as one. Type yes if you're ready to see what federal investigators found in the encrypted communications. The digital evidence was devastating. When forensic analysts cracked the encryption on Ambassador Salazar's phones, they found more than 3,400 messages. Detailed instructions, shipping schedules, payment confirmations, shipment cleared, no inspection, transfer complete, $4.2 million received, route secure through Baltimore, proceed as planned. Every message was deliberate, professional, coordinated. This was not reckless behavior. It was careful planning executed over years. The messages revealed a hierarchy. Salazar was not acting alone. He reported to officials in Caracas. He coordinated with cartel operatives in Mexico and Colombia. He managed financial transfers through intermediaries in Miami and New York. The network operated like a corporation. Clean divisions, clear roles, regular reporting. One encrypted file contained a ledger spanning 7 years. It tracked every protected shipment, dates, weights, values, destinations. The total was impossible to ignore: 127 diplomatic shipments, 8,940 kilograms of narcotics, $1.87 billion in combined value, all moved under immunity. Federal analysts identified 63 key individuals connected to the operation. Some worked in logistics, others handled finances. A few operated inside institutions meant to protect the public. None appeared suspicious. That was the design. The system relied on routine, on trust, on the assumption that diplomatic privilege would never be questioned. Investigators found contracts with freight companies, agreements with warehouse operators, payments to port officials who looked the other way. This wasn't infiltration. This was collaboration. Comment your reaction if this shocks you. By the time federal prosecutors finished reviewing the evidence, one conclusion was unavoidable. This was not the work of a single ambassador acting alone. This was a state-sponsored operation. Venezuelan government officials had used diplomatic channels to traffic narcotics into the United States for more than a decade. They had exploited international law. They had weaponized trust. And they had done it with precision. The diplomatic shock wave hit within hours. Inside the U.S. State Department, emergency meetings began before dawn. Phones rang non-stop. Advisors moved quickly between secure rooms. Screens showed maps, timelines, sealed intelligence reports. One message repeated again and again. This was no longer just a criminal case. Within 72 hours, the Venezuelan government issued 7 formal protests. Officials in Caracas called the raids an act of hostility. State media framed the operation as political persecution. Washington's response was measured but firm. Diplomatic immunity does not protect criminal activity. When embassies are used as shields for illegal operations, the law must act. For many Americans, this moment felt familiar. It echoed past eras when trust between nations collapsed behind closed doors. Not with tanks in the streets, but with documents, intelligence briefings, controlled public statements. The kind of tension that doesn't shout, it spreads. Behind the scenes, intelligence agencies began comparing notes. Analysts asked difficult questions. How long had this been happening? Who else knew? How many other diplomatic channels had been quietly abused? What troubled investigators most was not the money or the drugs alone. It was the method. Diplomatic systems exist to prevent conflict. They are built on trust. When that trust is misused, the damage reaches far beyond borders. Federal analysts confirmed that protected shipments had passed through U.S. ports and highways for years without inspection. No alarms, no delays. Everything appeared legitimate on paper. That realization changed the tone of the investigation. This was no longer about one ambassador or one embassy. It was about a vulnerability inside the international system itself. Share this so more people understand how diplomatic privilege was turned into a weapon. Allies were briefed. Quiet warnings were sent. Financial institutions were alerted to freeze related accounts. Across government agencies, a single concern took shape. If diplomacy can be weaponized this quietly, then security cannot rely on tradition alone. By the end of the week, Washington had made its position clear. Not in speeches, in action. Law would come first. Transparency would follow. And immunity would not mean invisibility. The relationship between the United States and Venezuela entered its most fragile phase in decades. Talks stalled. Channels narrowed. Trust, once damaged, became difficult to restore. For the American public, one hard truth settled in. When power hides behind flags instead of laws, even peace can become a cover. The investigation moved into its most disturbing phase. This was no longer about one embassy. What federal analysts uncovered pointed to something much larger and far more dangerous. Bank records revealed 317 accounts tied directly or indirectly to the network. Many were registered under non-profit organizations, humanitarian groups, medical foundations. On the surface, they funded food aid, medical shipments, cultural programs. In reality, they moved money quietly, regularly, without scrutiny. Investigators identified 61 key individuals connected to the operation. Some worked in logistics. Others handled finances. A few operated inside institutions meant to protect the public interest. None appeared violent. None looked suspicious. That was the point. This system did not rely on fear. It relied on routine. Shipping documents showed that protected diplomatic cargo had traveled through American ports for years. Trucks crossed state lines without inspection. Warehouses operated under legal exemptions. Everything followed the rules. Except the truth. The numbers were impossible to ignore. Over a decade, analysts linked the network supply lines to tens of thousands of overdose cases across multiple states. Hospitals saw the damage long before investigators saw the cause. Families buried loved ones without ever knowing where the poison had entered the country. For older Americans watching this story, the realization was painful. Many remembered a time when official seals meant safety, when paperwork meant order, when institutions were trusted because they were built to serve. This case showed how that trust had been used as cover. Federal officials described it plainly. This was not a cartel hiding from the system. This was a system that had been quietly bent to serve criminal ends. Hit subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Once the routes were exposed, the response was swift. Financial institutions froze accounts. Non-profit boards were dissolved. International partners were notified. The flow of money slowed, then stopped. By conservative estimates, more than $1.93 billion in illegal revenue was cut off in a matter of weeks. But the damage could not be reversed so easily. Trust does not return when accounts are frozen. Lives are not restored when warehouses are sealed. Communities affected by addiction watched the hearings in silence. Not anger, not surprise, recognition. They had felt the consequences long before the cause was named. By the end of the investigation phase, one conclusion stood above all others. This was not a failure of enforcement. It was a failure of oversight. And once a system learns it can operate without being questioned, it will continue. Until someone finally looks closely enough. The system had been exposed. What remained was the harder task ahead, deciding how to rebuild what had been quietly broken. When the operations ended and the briefing slowed, the story did not disappear. It changed shape. For many Americans, this was no longer about drugs, money, or even foreign governments. It became a question of trust. Who deserves it, and how easily it can be abused. Diplomacy was created to prevent conflict. Flags, seals, and immunity exist so nations can speak instead of fight. But this case revealed what happens when those protections are twisted into shields for crime. When that line is crossed, diplomacy stops being a bridge. It becomes a hiding place. Federal leaders spoke carefully. There were no victory speeches, no celebrations, only statements of responsibility. They made one point clear. The law does not stop at the embassy gate. When international privilege is used to harm American communities, action is not optional. It is required. If you believe justice matters, comment justice below. Across government agencies, new safeguards were announced. Diplomatic cargo rules were reviewed. Financial reporting standards were tightened. Intelligence sharing expanded with allies who now faced the same uncomfortable question. How many other systems had been trusted without verification? For older viewers, the moment carried a deeper weight. Many had lived through decades when institutions were steady, predictable, respected. They had been taught that authority came with duty, and duty came with accountability. Watching that belief shaken did not produce outrage. It produced reflection. Communities hardest hit by addiction did not ask for revenge. They asked for honesty. They wanted to know how suffering could spread so quietly, how paperwork could move poison, how authority could fail without warning sirens. At the same time, another truth stood firm. The system did not collapse. It responded. Agents moved before dawn. Analysts followed the numbers others ignored. Medics ran toward danger. Investigators stayed patient when answers came slowly. Some were injured. None stepped back. They did not act for attention. They acted because that is what the shield is meant to do. By the final count, $1.93 billion in illegal revenue had been cut off. Hundreds of accounts frozen. Multiple international investigations launched. The damage could not be erased. But the bleeding had stopped. The lesson was not simple, but it was clear. Power is not dangerous because it exists. It becomes dangerous when it is assumed to be untouchable. Trust is not preserved by tradition alone. It survives only when it is questioned, tested, and defended. Share this video before it gets buried. The raid at the embassy ended one network, but its deeper purpose was larger than arrests or seizures. It was a reminder that silence protects wrongdoing, that oversight protects people, and that even the most respected systems must answer to the truth. Because when trust is earned, it strengthens a nation. And when it is abused, it must be taken back. Calmly, firmly, without hesitation. The story did not end with sirens. It ended with responsibility. Responsibility is a word people use easily until a moment like this forces them to define it. When the raids ended, the networks collapsed, and the embassy doors were sealed, a final question rose to the surface. Who allowed this to happen? Not in the sense of blame alone, but in the deeper sense of duty. A system this large does not break because of one man, and it does not recover unless responsibility is understood clearly and honestly. For many Americans, especially older viewers, this was a painful chapter. They grew up believing that institutions protected the public, that checks and balances were built not for decoration, but for safety. And yet here, inside a foreign mission on American soil, a criminal operation had thrived quietly, professionally, undetected. That does not happen because one diplomat makes a choice. That happens because multiple layers of oversight fail at the same time. Responsibility in this case unfolded across 3 levels. The first layer belonged to the individual who abused diplomatic privilege. Ambassador Salazar used immunity not as protection but as camouflage. His actions were deliberate, sophisticated, and long-term. His choices had consequences measured not in money but in lives damaged by addiction across the country. Personal responsibility begins there, at the point where duty was replaced by greed and loyalty replaced by criminal purpose. But that is only the beginning. The second layer belonged to the people and structures that enabled the operation without asking questions. Every unchecked shipment, every unverified transfer, every exemption granted automatically. It all pointed to a system that assumed diplomacy was always benign. That assumption became a vulnerability. That vulnerability became a weapon. This layer of responsibility is not about corruption. It is about complacency. When rules are trusted instead of tested, danger grows quietly. And then came the third layer, the one that stretches further than any individual office. Responsibility shared across the international system. Diplomacy works because nations believe its protections will not be abused. When one mission violates that trust, the damage spreads to every embassy, every treaty, every negotiation. Responsibility in this sense becomes collective. Because the failure was not just American oversight but a breakdown in the global expectation that immunity would not be twisted into cover for crime. Federal investigators did not point fingers at the public. They did not accuse communities. Instead, they made a distinction older Americans understood well. Responsibility is not about punishment. It is about protection. It is about ensuring the same failure cannot happen again. It is about tightening the weak points, examining the assumptions, and reinforcing the structures that were ignored for too long. Comment below if you believe oversight must be stronger. In the end, responsibility fell on all 3 levels. A diplomat who chose betrayal, a system that trusted without verifying, and an international framework that relied on honor instead of oversight. Facing that truth was difficult, but denying it would have been worse. Because responsibility, when accepted, becomes the first step toward rebuilding trust. And trust, once restored, becomes the foundation for a safer nation. One where silence protects no one, and accountability protects everyone. When the final reports were filed and the embassy stood silent, the investigation shifted from uncovering facts to understanding meaning. The question was no longer what happened, but what happens now. Because once a system proves it can be bent, the real test is whether it can be straightened again. For many Americans, this chapter was the hardest to confront. They had watched institutions falter under the weight of trust misplaced. They had seen how silence allowed danger to grow, and they understood something younger generations often overlook. Accountability is not an event. It is a practice. A nation protects itself not by assuming the best, but by preparing for the worst. Federal officials, analysts, and lawmakers now faced a choice. They could treat this as an isolated scandal, or as a warning. The wiser path, the one older viewers recognized, was reflection. It meant reviewing every exemption, every channel, every privilege that had been taken for granted. It meant rethinking what protection truly means in a world where paperwork can move poison and a diplomatic seal can hide a pipeline. But there was also a deeper truth beneath it all. The system did not collapse. It responded. Agents acted. Investigators pressed forward. Oversight awakened. That response was imperfect, but it was real. And it proved that vigilance still has a place in modern America. What comes next will define more than this case. It will define whether trust once shaken can be rebuilt with honesty, clarity, and the courage to never look away. Hit like if you believe justice is worth fighting for. Subscribe so you don't miss updates on what happens next in this investigation. Share this story so more communities understand how the system was exploited. The fight continues. The work is not done. And the American people deserve to know the full truth about how their trust was weaponized against them. This is only the beginning.